Hello and welcome to Q&A Wednesday Live. My name is David Michalek. I'm your host, and we do this every week, 6 p.m. Eastern Time here on Facebook. We also simulcast on our YouTube page. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm glad to have you here. Please introduce yourself if you haven't. I see we got Mike here again, all tied up. I don't know what that. Oh, you playing golf, Mike? Is that what it is? Man, that's a heck of an accomplishment if you're playing golf and also deciding to be in the Q&A Wednesday at the same time. Mad props for that. That's pretty impressive. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to get right into it today because we're going to be going into, I would call this like the last chapter of the credit repair process. And by that I mean, what happens when the accounts that you're disputing come back verified? And it's a reality. This is just part of the process. Rick, great to have you back. Let me put you up here. Have a question? There's an account on my... You know what? Hold on, Rick. I'm just going to finish doing this intro, then I'm going to get right back to you. And then we'll get into questions here. Hi, Carrie. Welcome. Appreciate that. Mike, hockey. Awesome. I'm sure you're aware that our Golden Knights are still in the hunt a little bit. Looks like they are anyway. I think they got a big game coming up. But so let's get back to what do we do when the accounts that we're disputing come back as verified? In the credit repair process, what we're looking to do is remove as many accounts as we possibly can, either delete or we're looking for a modification. It's also called a repair. And what you're going to find in the process is a good portion of the time, unless there is a very clear error or violation or omission, something that is in direct violation of the law, these accounts will remain. Now, the only guarantee that you and I have when it comes to derogatory credit on a report is that it's going to be removed in about 7 years. Actually, it depends on the account, but sometimes it's 6 years, 9 months. A lot of the bureaus want to delete it just so they cover themselves. But we just round up and call it 7 years. Now, there's an exception. If it's a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, that's 10 years. But what are we going to do when the account, after multiple rounds of disputes, comes back and it is verified? So let me set the stage a little bit. Hold on one second. Let me go over to a slideshow. And the title of today is going to be When Your Account Has Been Verified to Be Reporting Accurately. Any account, and you've heard me say this before, especially if you've been on the Facebook Lives, any account can be deleted or repaired if it's not reporting accurately, and if the data furnisher can't correct it. Now, these are a couple of ifs here. Let me explain what I mean. When you send in a dispute, now I'm talking about trade lines. The collections also fall under this, but there's an additional piece of legislation that comes into play when we're talking about collections. That's called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. But let's talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. There's really 4 reasons why an account gets deleted. Either it's erroneous, outdated, incomplete, or the big one, unverifiable. If you saw my Facebook Live, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, I talked about accounts being unverifiable is one of the big reasons why accounts get deleted. It's not necessarily because they're reporting inaccurately or they have very obvious errors. The creditor, aka the data furnisher, sometimes is just set up to delete certain accounts under certain conditions when you send in a dispute. Now, when we're talking about the dispute process, we're looking into the box here, challenges an account by stating an objection and asking for a resolution. If you look at your disputes, if you're in Credit Versio, you're creating your disputes, you'll notice that there's 2 parts to it. There's stating the objection, which is, hey, I don't remember being late, or I have no relationship with this collection company. And the resolution is, please delete the account, or please provide proof. It's some kind of action that we're looking for the data furnisher. Again, data furnishers are creditors, or anybody who supplies information to the credit bureaus. The second part of this sentence is really what the critical part is. The burden of proof and performance is on the data furnisher and the credit bureau. You and I don't have any burden when it comes to proving the information is correct. If we think a late payment wasn't late on the date that they're reporting, if we think that we don't owe a certain dollar amount, or if the open date is wrong, or if anything on that credit report that we don't agree with and possibly even hurting us and hurting our score. If we don't agree with that, we can send in a dispute. And then the complete burden is on the creditor and to some degree the bureau as well. Now, let's go on to the next slide. It can take up to 4 or 5 rounds of dispute letters to get some kind of resolution, whether that's favorable or unfavorable. In the box, it says expect some back and forth. The dispute process is almost always a multi-letter dispute process. Disputing, by the way, does not guarantee a favorable outcome. Now, what do I mean by a favorable outcome? A deletion, a repair, some kind of result that is going to help us in some way, whether it's just cosmetically on the credit bureau or it's a very damaging item that's hurting our score. Now, remember, when we dispute an account, we're setting a course of action. We're setting or putting in place a course of action. And the thing that is taking place behind the scenes with the credit bureau is they are beginning an investigation. And that is them going through the process of submitting the dispute to the creditor and asking them to verify the information or delete it if it's not reporting accurately. This is always a multi-letter process. I guess maybe tens of thousands of clients. I can't tell you how many reviews that I've done, thousands and thousands of reviews. A handful of occasions I've seen people get 100% of the accounts they've deleted on the first round. Usually it's collections, usually they're very old, but it doesn't happen very often. So it is a strategic process. First round, second round follow-up, then a third and a fourth round. So just be prepared for that. One of the things that happens quite frequently, and this is how we know that somebody did not go through their quick start videos, is right after round 1, they'll have a little success or a couple items will get deleted, or sometimes no items get deleted. And they'll call in or create a help ticket. What went wrong? How come, what do I do next? Well, you go to round 2. So you got to go through your quick start videos. That's usually the tell when people call up and they ask questions that are answered in the quick start videos. Okay, next, the dispute process is a finite process with diminishing returns after 5 rounds. This is a really important part. Think about it for a second. If you're familiar with monthly fee companies, I'm not going to name any names, but I think if you're familiar at all with credit repair, you can probably rattle off the top 2 credit repair companies as far as size goes and their monthly fee. What would happen if they disputed everything at once? Say you got 20 items and they disputed all 20 items at the same time. And they did that for 2, 3, or 4 months. What would happen is whatever accounts can be deleted would be deleted in that period of time. They know that. But their business model is monthly fee. So they're going to drag this out month after month after month. I've talked to people who've been on these programs for 3, 4 years. The important part is that the dispute process is finite. Once you go 4 rounds, 5 rounds, maybe 5 rounds, and you're using suggested reasons, you don't really see anything on the credit report that is wrong or in violation of the law, but you're shooting your shot. You're giving it a try. There are diminishing returns once you get to about round 5. Okay, now if there isn't an error, then we're in the box now. Ongoing disputes without purpose have diminishing returns. Shoot your shot and move to the next phase. And this was that last sentence was really critical. You are shooting your shot. Now, a lot of people, and we can speak frankly here, I've been doing this a long, long time, and I've had thousands and thousands of consultations. One of the things that is very common for people who go into the repair process is they don't look at their credit report and say, yes, this is wrong, these dates are wrong, I don't owe this person, this balance is wrong, I've never even heard of these people before. I would say, upward of about 90% of the time, when people look at the credit report, they're like, yeah, I know all this, and let me just dispute it and see what happens. And when you're doing that, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, the law is on your side. You are legally empowered and entitled to do that if you like. And again, the burden of proof, the burden of performance is on the data furnishers and the bureaus. Keep in mind, that you're keeping your fingers crossed. Again, you're shooting your shot, and sometimes you're going to have success and sometimes not. And that's really what this conversation is going to be about today. And then I'll get into what do we do when we've gone through several rounds and the accounts come back and they are verified. Okay, let's take a couple of questions first. All right, Rick, let me get back to you. I promised I would. Great, you're back. It's good to be back. Thanks, Rick, for joining me. I have a question. There's an account on my credit report charge off that's fraudulent, and it's closed account reporting late payments. What can I do? If it's fraudulent, that's a great question. If you've been disputing the account and they're not removing it, you know for sure that it's not yours or it's fraudulent, then there's not really much more you can do on the dispute side. Okay, and I'm gonna touch on this in just a second, but I'll give you a little preview. This is where you reach out and you contact an attorney who specializes in FCRA law or FDCPA law. In your case, it would be an FCRA attorney, but usually they handle both kinds of law. Before you freak out thinking, oh my gosh, I got to spend a ton of money on an attorney. That's not the way attorneys in this industry work. They are compensated by the data furnisher and the bureau, sometimes by both of them. They never charge money out of pocket. When they look at a credit report, and I've been through this personally, I'll tell that story in a second. When they look at your credit report, the disputes that you've done, which is why Credit Versio is a great tool, because this is if you're using Credit Versio. Rick, I don't know if you are or not, but if you are, there's an inventory of all of your dispute letters in your account. So when that attorney wants to see those dispute letters, what you've sent, that's solid gold. I mean, that's the case right there. Again, this is if there's really something wrong or fraudulent about the account. And if you feel you're there, then send an email at support@creditversio.com and ask to have us suggest an attorney. We don't have any financial arrangement with these guys. We've been in this business a long time. We just happen to know a lot of them. Okay. Rick, Experian won't remove it. Okay. Yeah, maybe that's where you are. Okay. Carrie, I paid an account and they sent a copy of the front and back of the check. They keep saying verified and I'm not removing. It still says I owe. Carrie, probably the same answer for you as the one I just gave Rick. If this stuff happens, by the way, there's about roughly about 14,000 lawsuits that are filed against the credit bureaus and data furnishers every year. 14,000, that's a ton. And it happened to me too. I had something years ago. I had an old mortgage from Ocwen, if you guys have ever heard of Ocwen, and it was gone. It was deleted a long time prior, and then one day it just pops up. Not only did it just pop up as a charge-off collection, it was charge-off collection second mortgage, but it also said I had current late payments. I was currently 120 days or 120 or 150 days late, and these were called rolling 120s or rolling 150s. I can't remember which one it was. And it just destroyed my credit score. I think I lost like 100, 120 points. And I went through the dispute process. This was old hat to me. I've done this many times before. I'm looking at it. I can tell it's wrong. I lived in California, which was a non-recourse state, which means this was for a foreclosure. And if you don't know my story, that's how I got into credit repair back in 2012, as I was a client. And I was fascinated with it. But I had to get my credit fixed. I was one of those guys that owned a lot of property, and this was my one foreclosure. And California being a non-recourse state, meaning that when a house forecloses, that second mortgage is subordinate to the first, and it can't be on your credit report. They can't go after you for any money. But here it was on my credit report, showing up years later. And I ended up reaching out to a buddy of mine who's an attorney who specializes in this kind of law. And we didn't go to trial, but we went to court where the lawyers for both Equifax and Ocwen were just sitting across the table from me. And there was a little bit of a back and forth, very cordial. And eventually there was a settlement and they wrote me a pretty nice check. So these things do happen. And if you're not getting any traction, don't get frustrated at the process. It's not really about the letters. It's not about the language in the letter. It's just that sometimes you're not going to get resolution as easy as you would like, and you need to take it to that next level. Mike, what time frame do you consider legitimate investigations? I mentioned before, Experian started a dispute on May 3rd, and the dispute was resolved May 4th with no. Yeah, that's a little unusual. because of the speed of the electronic the software that data furnishers and bureaus use to talk to each other, when you get a response that fast, usually what that means is no investigation was done. This was an automatic reply. Now that's not uncommon to get that if you get a deletion, because as I said earlier, sometimes when you send a dispute, the creditor or the data furnisher simply understands that there's a set of criteria that they're not going to respond to. They're simply going to delete the account. We see that a lot with TransUnion and bankruptcy. In TransUnion, and I learned this early on from Steve Rieger, who was a partner of ours, and he used to manage the dispute processing center in TransUnion. He was there for 25 years. And one of the things he said is that, yeah, depending on the way you phrase the dispute, TransUnion, most of the time when you dispute a bankruptcy, they just delete it. Now, it's not so much the case with Equifax and Experian, but that just goes to show that there is certain criteria that bureaus have and that data furnishers have where they'll just delete it. Okay, Mike, well, that answers your question. Carrie, you are very welcome. Yes, they did, similar to me. Okay, let's move on here. Next slide. Okay, now, before we dive into what do we do after the dispute process ends, the first thing we got to figure out is there a violation? And this is exactly what I was talking about. Is there an error or violation that has not been fixed? Okay, this happens. And there's the stat that I showed you. Every year, 14,000 lawsuits are filed against the credit bureaus. In fact, if you're here routinely, you know that my friend John Alzheimer, who is with me twice a month, he is the most retained credit expert witness in the United States. So in fact, that's probably 90% of the work that he does. Is he goes to depositions, he writes reports, he does economic impact studies on people who claim to have been damaged by credit reporting. And one of the things that he told me not too long ago is that 2020 was the biggest year of lawsuits filed. So this is a real thing. Okay, let's see. Jay, I've been trying to get 1,520 day late payments off my report. It's a student loan with 3 parts, and it started at 120 days late for 5 months, giving me 15 poor reports. Let me bring that back up again. That's a big post for one loan. How can I get this cleared? I paid the loan off. Wasn't late for 4 years. Okay, couple things, Jay. First of all, I would just delete the late payments. Have you given that a try? Student loans can be, especially if they're federal student loans. So we're NELNET, we're Department of Ed, Great Lakes. Especially if it's paid, if you send the dispute letter, and you can go with the suggested reason. So if you've got a Credit Versio account, your credit report is imported. Credit Versio is going to scan that credit report. It's going to see the student loans. It's going to see that there's late payments, and it's going to give you a suggested reason. And if so, you tried that twice, and it's NELNET. Okay, well, let me bring that up here. Okay. Now, you tried it twice through? Are you on round 2 with Credit Versio? Is that what you're saying? Now, if you're on round 2 with Credit Versio, then here's what I would do next. Have you tried a Goodwill letter? Because sometimes those can work. Now, by the way, I've got like a little ace in the hole for you when it comes to this kind of an account. But let me know if you've used Credit Versio to do it. Because if people are disputing online, no, you tried it by yourself. Okay, Jay, did you do the dispute online? This is one of the reasons why you don't want to do a dispute online. They're not handled the same way, and a lot of times you don't get that traction because there's no paper trail. So what I would do is a paper dispute through Credit Versio. Okay, great, excellent. Big difference between the reason why Credit Versio is paper dispute, and I know it's very counterintuitive. I mean, here we are in the 21st century, and we're using paper disputes. Well, why are we doing that? It seems so backward. Well, the reason for that is we have to align ourselves with the laws that were written that protect you and protect me. And the laws were written largely in the 1970s. There was no internet then. And the way that paper disputes are handled are very different than the type of disputes that are sent digitally. Okay, no, I'm sure you didn't do this. This is nothing against you, but this is just a statement of fact that people, when they do online disputes, they don't read the fine print. You don't realize how much of or how many of your rights you're giving up for the convenience of online disputes. Okay, you are very much at a disadvantage with an online dispute. So start from scratch. Get Credit Versio. I highly recommend it. Start with a round one dispute. You got a paper dispute now, paper trail. Paper trails create problems for creditors, especially if they're not complying with the law. Now you have evidence, just like what I was talking about a second ago for Rick, and I think for Carrie. When you have a history of disputes, paper disputes in hand, and there's a violation of the law, that's what an attorney is going to love to see. Now, I hope it doesn't escalate to that level. That's certainly not the goal. But the point of it is, when you have a paper dispute, that data furnisher, when they know that it's been received by a paper or sent by a paper dispute, they're like, okay, this changes things a little bit. Okay, it's not an online dispute. Okay, yeah, don't worry about phone calls, Jay. I mean, that's very, very low level. There's no evidence at all. Paper dispute is where everything takes place. Okay, I thought I saw, and if that doesn't answer your question, just let me know, and we'll dive a little deeper. Oh, I promise you I had an ace in the hole for you. I believe you said that, let me just read your comment again. Paid the loan off and was never late for 4 years. If your late payments, and correct me if I'm wrong, if your late payments are 2-3 years old, you've largely recovered from them, as long as, provided you've got other good credit. So if you've got good history, credit card, maybe a car, you don't need a mortgage, but if you had one, that's going to help. If you know, you more or less have kept your nose clean for the last 2, 3, 4 years, paying everything on time, everything looks good, this stuff it's aging. There's not really much of an impact it's going to have on you right now. Okay, boss Francois. Hello, David. When sending our dispute letters, I researched that you don't want to sign any. No, it doesn't matter. Let me. I hope I'm saying this right, boss. There's so much nonsense out there, and unfortunately, a lot of it comes from the credit repair industry. A lot of it comes from guys or companies like myself who really spent a lot of time creating slick marketing and all kinds of nonsense that discourages people from doing this stuff themselves. And there's stuff like staple your dispute letters so that it can't go through the OCR machine, so they have to take it apart and read it by hand. But you don't want them to do that. You want this done digitally, just like every other dispute. Send it in on colored paper. That might have been a thing years ago, but modern OCR machines, these are the scanners that bureaus use. They don't care what color paper it's on. Or handwrite your letter. It's nonsense. You never want to handwrite letters. In fact, I had Steve Rieger on probably about a year ago. He used to run the dispute division for TransUnion. He flat out told everybody on the call, don't handwrite letters. What happens if your handwriting is, what if it sucks? They can't read it. What are they going to do? They're going to send it back to you or send you a letter saying that, hey, we don't know what you're talking about. Type it. It's perfectly fine. Sign your letter. Include your ID. Because the thing that you don't want to have happen is you don't want the Bureau to send you a letter saying, hey, we don't know who you are. You don't have any ID. We couldn't read your letter. So you lose a month. And that's why I'm suggesting that you don't believe in a lot of that stuff. Yeah, sign your letter is perfectly fine. Mike, I wouldn't have never known that. You lose a lot of rights disputing online. Another thing learned. Yeah, you do. Read the fine print. I've said this thousands of times before. Online disputes are not for you, and they're not for me. They're for the convenience of the Bureau. One of the things that's interesting is, and this is one of the reasons why things get, one of the questions I get a lot is, hey, if this gets deleted, is it going to come back on my credit report? That's a real concern. Well, how does that happen? Why do things get reinserted into a credit report? A lot of the times when I see that, it's an online dispute. And I won't go through a lot of the details because it's a little uninteresting. But the short version is, if you send a dispute to the Bureau and the Bureau just decides to delete the account, they don't have an obligation to tell the data furnisher. Well, what happens the next month? Well, the data furnisher, when it sends in all of its updates, It doesn't know the bureau deleted that account, and it re-reports the same account. So that's one of the little problems with online disputing. Now, am I saying that's going to happen every time? No. But when I see accounts that come back, when I talk to the person, usually it's an online dispute. Okay. 6 years old. Oh, Jay, come on. Come on, my friend. 6 years old. Dude, you are fine. Okay, you are over that. That's getting ready to drop off. Score is 758. That's an epic score. Here's one thing, and make a mental note of this. Depending on what you're doing with your credit report, I can almost guarantee you when those student loans fall off, when those late payments fall off, you're not going to see any change in your score. Not because of that. You've already recovered from it. You recovered from it a long time ago. Jay, you are very welcome. Color paper, yeah, Mike, no, that was a thing. That was a thing. Boss, thank you, David. I'm really excited about Credit Versio. Great to have you, and it's an awesome tool to walk you through the process. Okay, I think we got a question down here. Can I get rid of a repo that I turned in 2014? That's an old repo, William. Does it have a deficiency balance? That's where you see problems with repos. It's not just the repo itself, because all a repo is on your credit report, you'll see in the payment status, it says collection charge-off. The problem is when you've got a deficiency balance and if they farmed it out to a collection company. Not to say that you can't get rid of it, but just go through the dispute process. Credit Versio knows what a repo is. It just sees it as a collection charge-off. And probably the default reason it's going to give you is a late payment dispute, which for some people that doesn't make sense. Why would I dispute the late payments on a repo? Remember earlier I talked about sometimes creditors have preset reactions to certain types of disputes. Sometimes when you dispute an old charge-off or a repo and you're asking for late payment history, well, what if they archive that stuff? Sometimes creditors do that after 24, 36 months. Sometimes the natural response is this is gonna be an account that's deleted. Okay. Okay, what about credit inquiries? Johnson the Queen. Let me tell you something about credit inquiries. In fact, I just posted a video. It's not live yet, where I have John Alzheimer. If you're new here, John is one of my routine guests. He is considered to be the #1 credit expert in the United States, having worked for both Equifax and FICO. And one of the things that we go back and forth and joke around about a lot is that people worry about inquiries. Inquiries are not even, worst case scenario, 10% of your score. Not even that most of the time. Inquiries don't always have an impact on your score. And if you have a lot of them in a short period of time, it only counts as one inquiry. The funny thing to me is, and I shouldn't say funny, it just goes to show that none of us get the credit education that we really need to get early on. Because we'll look at something like an inquiry and go, oh my gosh, this is horrific. But meanwhile, I got 2, 3, 4 charge-offs and collections and late payments, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. Don't worry about inquiries, please. Okay, they take care of themselves. You largely recover from them in just a couple of months. And incidentally, no model of FICO, so if you're going to get a house, a car, a credit card, insurance, no model of FICO gives any weight or significance to an inquiry when it's 12 months old. Now, cosmetically, they're on your credit report for 24 months. You can see them, but it doesn't mean that has any effect. So focus your time, energy, and effort is better focused elsewhere, not on inquiries. Okay, and yes, 1100. Not sure. Let's see, 1100. Not sure what that means. William. Johnson the Queen, you're very welcome. Okay, let me get back to the slideshow because now we're getting into the interesting part here. Okay, now, after the dispute process, we've done 4 or 5 rounds. We don't see anything on there that's an obvious violation. We shot our shot. We didn't have any success. Okay, now what? There's 3 steps. Step number 1. Okay, settled outstanding debts if you can, or if you have any, of course, and if you can. If you have any collections, this is not original creditors. Okay, this isn't like Ford or Chase or Discover or American Express. This is like Convergent, Midland, Enhanced Recovery. These are your third-party debt collectors. Try to get a pay for delete. What that is is, let's say I have a debt from my cable bill and Midland Funding has it and I owe $500. What I'm going to do is pick up the phone. This is not done through paper. Okay, this is a drag. So you gotta have your ducks in a row, and you gotta put on the big boy and the big girl pants and make this phone call, because it can be difficult to make. It's not really a big deal, but I'm going to call up Midland Funding and say, listen, I got this debt. I want to take care of it. It's $500. I got 300. Will you take the 300 today? And also, too, I want to pay for delete. So I want in writing that you're going to delete this from all three credit bureaus. This is if it's reporting, but it probably is. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Will you delete this from my credit report? And I give you the $300. If they say yes, you are golden. That is awesome. It is going to be removed from the credit report. Get that in writing. Have it physically, in email or however they want to do it before you make that $300 payment. All right, now, what if they don't do that? What if it's no dice? They're not interested in making that kind of an arrangement. Okay, from there, let's look at the box here. So collection accounts, or a collection account with a zero balance, are ignored by the newer, the contemporary FICO and Vantage Score models. I made a very special point to bring this up. This is a thing that I see everywhere, on YouTube, on ads that I see. Of course, because I'm in this business, every time I scroll through Instagram or I scroll through Facebook, I'm getting hit with credit repair ads all the time. And one of the bits of bad advice that I see frequently is don't pay collections. Never pay collections. If you pay a collection, it's not going to help you. It's not true at all. If you're getting, now there's an exception though. If you're getting a mortgage loan, that old FICO model doesn't care if you paid your collection or not. But the new contemporary FICO 8, FICO 9, FICO 10, which is around the corner, Vantage Score 3.0, 4.0, when that collection is paid for, it is ignored. Okay, cosmetically, it's still there. You're going to see it, but it doesn't have any effect on your credit score. So if you have the means, if it's the right thing to do, if you can pull it off, do a pay for delete. See if they'll give it to you. Number 2, wait 6 to 12 months and start the dispute process again. Hey, let's say you're not in a position to settle these old debts. Okay, it happens. It's not uncommon at all. What can you do? Remember earlier I talked about some accounts are archived. Accounts that are 24, maybe 36 months old. Sometimes those data furnishers archive that data. So what does that mean to you? You wait 6 months or so, you start from round 1 and you dispute the accounts again. It could be different this time around. I've seen this happen many, many times through thousands and thousands of clients, that they didn't have any success on a couple of accounts. They waited 6 months, maybe 12 months. They went at it again, and it's a different time. It's a different period for that data furnisher. They don't have that information anymore, or that file moved into a position where now it's going to give that automatic deletion. It happens. I mean, it's not a guarantee. There's no promise there, but if you are on your journey of credit improvement, that's not a bad idea. And number 3. This is not going to be the ideal situation, but allow the accounts to age off while building good credit. So we had a couple, I think it was Jay, and I'm not sure who the other person was that made a comment, but a couple of people have really old accounts on here. Jay, I think you said yours was 6 years old, the student loan. Forgive me if I'm getting the wrong person. But that's going to age off. You move on. Life goes on. Do things that improve your credit. Keep your credit card utilization rates low. Ideally, pay them off. Use credit responsibly, and don't have an excessive amount of credit that you don't need. And your credit report and score improves naturally over time. And that's just the reality of it. I think I might have missed 1 or 2 questions in here. I'm going to scroll through real quick. We're coming up on about 35 minutes. Usually I like to keep these about 35 to 45. If you have any questions you can think of, please shoot them my way right now. That way I can answer them before we drop off here. Oh, no, the one I saw, Mike, was the colored paper. I thought you were asking me about a certain kind of paper. That's, yeah, colored paper. Okay. Any other questions about the dispute process, about settling debt? Again, one of the things that you're going to have a challenge with when you're in the dispute process is when creditors come back and say, "Hey, listen, everything, all of the ducks are in a row, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and nothing's going to come off." And in the company that I worked at before, which is a very high end, very quality credit repair company, I was there for about 7.5 years. Uh, they were very, very effective, or so I thought. It turns out that the deletion success rate with them is no different than the deletion success rate with Credit Versio. So, um, but what they did that was pretty awesome was uh, they had a good process of advising people on how to settle debt and maybe get a little progress that way. So keep in mind that when you come to the end of the credit repair process, if you have any debts to settle, it's always a good idea. Just be smart about it. Okay, Johnson the Queen. Okay, what about auto loans? What do they really look for a low APR? What shouldn't be on your report? Anything new? I just went through this myself. I just bought a new car late last year. Um, if you want to know what your auto FICO is, here's how I knew, and it was spot on, right to the point. I have an Experian app on my phone, and yeah, I pay like $25 a month for it, but it'll give me my auto FICO score. In fact, there's two auto FICOs. I think there's an 8 and there's a 7, and most bigger dealerships, banks are going to use the newest auto FICO. Now that's if they use Experian, which Wells Fargo did. So I looked. My auto FICO score was, I think, 787 or 767, one of the two. I can't remember what it was, but I remember looking at it and like right before I applied for my car loan, like I'm looking at my Experian app. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. I paid off my credit card debt, almost off, and then I applied for my loan, and the score they gave me was the one that I got on my phone. So to answer your question, let me pull you back up. Oh, nope, wrong one. Where are you? There we go. Uh, really what they look at, and the reason why there's an auto loan or an auto credit score, is they want to see how you've handled auto loans in the past. For example, what auto lenders know that if you go through a tough time financially, they understand that there might be some late payment history on credit cards. There might be some late payment history on student loans, and they don't ding you for that as much because they understand, if they look at your auto loan history, that if you can have these things go a little bit sideways, but you made your auto loan payments on time, which a lot of people do, when they have some trouble, they figure out a way to pay that car payment because they don't want to be taking the bus. But that's what that auto FICO score is looking at, is how do you handle your auto loans in the past. And if you don't have any auto loans, then they make a predictive, they use predictive measures based on other information on your credit report. But really what you don't want to have, Johnson, is you don't want to have anything recent. You don't want to have any charge-offs, and you certainly don't want to have anything derogatory that is auto-related. What about business owners? Would you recommend using biz cards over personal as you build personal credit? You know, boss, I've seen a lot of people do that. There's some great guys out there. If you're building business credit, there's a guy that I really like by the name of Ty Crandall. I think his product is called Credit Suite. Pretty sure that's what it is. I have no affiliation with Ty at all. I just think that what he does is pretty cool. And that's one of the things that he does, is he teaches people how to, from scratch, create a business credit if their personal credit isn't so good. You know, that's up to you. If you've got a business, yeah, it makes sense to have good business credit, but I wouldn't pick one over the other. I mean, your personal credit's essential, because at some point, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't think you can do things right out of the gate or anytime soon, like buy a home with your business credit. Probably could buy a car. I've seen that done before. But yeah, I wouldn't get distracted solely on building business credit. Working on your personal credit, improving that is an essential thing. Because, by the way, it's not really just about your credit score and getting approved. So many people are looking at credit reports. Employers look at them. Insurance companies look at them. They tell a story. They tell a story of how we manage debt. And I know this is a sensitive subject, and I tell people whether they like it or not, or agree with it or not, or think it's a good idea. Credit reports have very much become character reports, reputation reports, because there's so much on it. Every Back in the day, it used to be a history of our loans, but now anything financial that we do, or if things go sideways, they end up on our credit report, and it tells a story. It's like, how does this person handle financial responsibility? Now, granted, things happen in life; they do, but somebody told me something years ago that stuck with me to this day. This is why I used to run finance for Saturn, so I'm dating myself here. But she was a lender, and she came in and she said, "Listen, I was trying to get some people that I really liked into a car, and they had some problems." And that rep said, "Listen, David, no bank's a story bank," and that really hit me. And this is true. Your credit report is telling your story for you. You don't get a chance to tell your story, like what happened. This is why I paid it late. This is how things, COVID or whatever, or before COVID. They don't want to hear your story. Your credit report's telling your story. Hope that makes sense, boss. Thanks, David. Look forward to the next week, Mike. I'll have John Olsheimer with me on the next call, so please join. What about timeshare? Could not afford anymore. Oh, wow. William, what I would do is there are law firms that specialize in that. In fact, I know, here, do this. Send me an email at davidm@creditversio.com. There's an attorney that I know. That's he's got a whole practice on getting people out of timeshares and the damage that it does to their credit report. I don't know what he charges, if anything at all, but that would be more in his camp. And his name is Patty Deegan. And shoot me over an email. I'll give you his info. Maybe he can help you. Okay. Next one, should you dispute derogatory collections or call collection agencies to negotiate? Sean, here's what I would do. I would dispute it first, and here's why. First of all, under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, one of the things that a collection company has to do is they have to prove they've got a legal right to collect. Otherwise, how do you know? I've seen this before. What happens, let's just say it's XYZ collection company, and you pick up the phone and call them and settle the debt, and then 2 months later, ABC credit repair company or a collection company calls and says, "Hey, Sean, you owe us for this money." Now you're like, "Well, I already paid this company." Well, they don't owe that debt. We own that debt now. So that's a real problem. That's why that law exists. So I would dispute that account, do 2 rounds. So round 1 is like, "Hey, I don't have a contract with you. Why don't you demonstrate to me that you have a legal right to collect, provide me the information that you're required to provide me." You'd be surprised. This isn't a promise or a guarantee, of course, but you'd be surprised at how many collections disappear because they don't have the proper information. In fact, most debts are purchased and sold on spreadsheets, and they don't have the documentation that they're supposed to have. Sherry, what's more effective in your opinion for taking off a late payment, a dispute, or Goodwill letter? Sherry, that's an awesome question, and it depends. Okay, let me give you. And I'm glad you asked that question because I was going to talk about Goodwill letters today, but I ran out of time. But now that we're coming down to the end of the call, let me address Goodwill letters. Goodwill letters used to be a big shot in the dark. Like, by that I mean they weren't successful most of the time. Here's the ideal situation for a Goodwill letter. If you have good payment history, then you had a moment in time where you didn't. Maybe you got some 30, 60, 90s, but then you caught up. Okay, so good, your moment in time, that's not so good, and you got caught up. That is when you send a Goodwill letter. Okay, you don't send Goodwill letters when you got a charge off or a collection or the account's closed. It's when it's good, period of time, now good again. And go into if you have Credit Versio, great. If you don't, then just get a free account. You don't need to connect a 3-bureau credit report if you don't want to. Go into Credit Versio, create a free account into the template section. Let me see if I've got it right here. Where is that screenshot? Oh, here it is. No, that's not it. Okay, well, I thought I had a screenshot of the tutorial section. Okay, I don't. When you go into Credit Versio, you go into tutorials, and then there's templates. In templates, there's a Goodwill letter template, and it's got a cover page that gives you the instructions on how to do a Goodwill letter. If that account that you want to dispute fits that description, try that first. remarkable. I'm actually very impressed right now. I think it has to do with, not think, I know it has to do with the state of the economy, with COVID, with people out of work, that a lot of creditors who would normally never give a Goodwill removal of late payments are doing it. Give that a shot if you think you're a good candidate. Otherwise, do a dispute. Again, the burden of proof is on the data furnisher, but I would definitely try the Goodwill letter first. Great stuff here. Thanks for sharing all the education on credit. Rick, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining. Sean, okay, you're very welcome. I think I got everybody. And let's see. Okay, great. Those are all the comments. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to wrap things up. Next week, we're going to have John Alzheimer, formerly of FICO and Equifax. If you've been here before, you know he's awesome. He's always got some great information. And I will see you Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you have any questions about anything that I've covered, just drop them in the comment section, and I'll get to them. And then thank you very much. We'll see you next time.